Karthikeyan is a PMO head and director and a transformational project program manager with 20 years of industry experience. He has been working in leading companies along with their clients as well. He has significant experience in working with global capability and development centers. He has managed several key programs over the last few years, including process improvement, transformation, digitization, etc. He has solid experience in managing budgets for multiple business lines up to 250 million US dollars. He has a good understanding of various methodologies in IT and operations. Along with that, he has strong people management skills and extensive experience of managing diverse teams. He has led roles both in the IT delivery and in the PMO space in this period. He is a portfolio management professional along with project management professional and good standing, of course, till 2023. He's a certified DevOps leader since 2018, a PMO CP certified since 2020, a member of the PMI Bangalore chapter, as well as a member of the PMO Global Alliance since 2019. He is also an innovation enthusiast, having participated and managed hackathons as well as being a part of corporate accelerator programs. Have also led corporate digitization programs in the recent past as well. His most recent interest is in the impact of tech disruption on the project management and the PMO world. You can see him a lot active on LinkedIn and he is present on Facebook as well. So feel free to connect to him on LinkedIn and let's jump into the journey of crystal gazing. Karthik, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Suma. Thanks, Venkat. I hope all of you are able to hear me.
Yes, Karthik, loud and clear.
Okay, great. I think given some of the challenges we were facing, that's a good start. Thanks, Suma, for that wonderful introduction. I think it's probably more than I deserve, but thanks so much for that. Again, one caveat there. I think now I've become kind of PMI chapter agnostic. I'm working with all chapters, many chapters, and a few chapters outside India also. And really my intent is to share what I'm learning, and it's a journey. So thanks first of all for taking out the time on a weekday to make this session, and I really appreciate that. I will start with kind of briefly talking to you what my learning has been in the last 20 years, very briefly, and then we'll jump into the crystal gazing part, which I think is what we are really interested in. I just have to warn you, we have a little bit of a technical glitch. Some of our videos that I had here are not showing up on WebEx. We're not able to hear them on WebEx. So I'll try and work around that. And we will, of course, share all the content with you. And Suma will obviously put that up, and including the recording of this session. So you should not lose that sometimes, sharing that video together kind of also gives you a quick connect. But as she said, I'm available on various forums, particularly on LinkedIn, to discuss any of these topics. So feel free to reach out to me. More than happy to do that. So my journey, I think, is similar to many of yours. It's not a very differentiated journey. I started, passed out doing my master's in computer application in 2000. And I've been in the corporate world largely for the last 20 years. Some of the companies that I worked with are on the slide. I hope you're able to see it. And I currently work with Amadeus. So really, I started my PMO, my larger journey, if you look at it, has shifting between running PMOs and doing delivery. I started my career in TCS as a developer in the IT world, and if I would apologize if some of you here are from the non-tech domain, whether it's construction or manufacturing or in the area. I will try not to make this very tech intensive. I do promise that. So yeah, I mean, I started with TCS, and I ran TCS's largest account PMO, which was GE which was roughly a quarter of TCS's revenue there. It was a very, very good experience for me to start my career in a PMO with that. I moved from that to start PMO for a client, and it gave me a view on doing some PMO consulting work very initially. And this was in the first 5 to 6 years of my career. So I feel blessed that I got those opportunities, and that's the area I really want to work in. Then at Oracle, I was there for about 4 years, and largely it was doing PMO roles at various levels with programs, with portfolios, largely with portfolios. And I, for the first time, understood really what a portfolio was, how different was it from a project, what's a program, things like that. And of course, in the middle of that, I had a few, intermediate phase of insecurity where I said, can I still go back to my bread and butter of doing IT delivery? And so I kind of moved to Unisys. I did ran a critical program there for a European client. Convinced myself that I can do that. And then I, for about 7 years, was with the Societe Generale. I would say the difference there was moving from a PMO role to more a COO, Chief of Staff kind of role, with not just the PMO function, but functions like communication, risk, business continuity reporting into me. And then I was also fortunate to kind of be part of the corporate innovation program at SocGen, and I mentored a couple of startups as part of the program, and I'm very much engaged with them still, and very happy to see that they're really gone far off of their own doing. And the other thing was, of course, I was largely used to doing IT PMOs, and at SocGen, it gave me the experience of running business PMO. So a lot of the back office, mid office activities that were done out of India, PMOs around that were also quite a good learning for me. And today, largely the function I run at Amadeus is a CO function that encompasses largely an organizational PMO, functions like risk, business continuity, internal communications, procurement, innovation. So all these functions, are part of the organization that I manage, and I really have an able team that kind of delivers this. And of course, Suma touched upon some of the certifications that I have got on the way, and as you see, my Agile certification is missing there, and I need to do something around it. So that's my next challenge, and within Amadeus, that's the next role that I will pick up in terms of managing the Agile transformation. Sorry for a very long introduction, but let's jump into what I really came here for. So I think crystal gaze is a bit of a leap, and I like putting my neck out, and I hope you will challenge me and question me. I would be happy to answer. So the 4 areas that I'll really talk. I mean, crystal gazing is, it depends on the day. Some days it looks that the future is very clear to you, and it looks very cloudy. So it's a mixed bag. You have to take it based on your learning, and there's no stopping point. You continue to integrate whatever you learn and try to see if you really are able to do. And then someone comes and tells you that your idea is utterly stupid for so and so reason, and then you just have to take that on board and readjust and start looking at it again. So it's an area fraught with the risk. I'm learning it. So what are we going to discuss today really is our 4 areas. I'm going to talk about a little bit about portfolio evolution, how the portfolios, I was recently talking about this to someone and was saying that this is one of the toughest areas because large organizations, medium to 10 large organizations tend to have hybrid portfolios. It's very difficult to integrate and bring decision-making, consolidated views to management, and it at times is the thing that's not is keeping me awake. And that person had really a quizzical look because obviously it's not something that's very obvious. So I'll talk a little bit about it and how it's progressing. we see the challenges, and I'm sure many of you relate to it. The other is, of course, the portfolio project management tools. There is an evolution story behind it. It's, over, if you see the last 20 plus years, most large companies that have mature project management processes tend to use it. But there's an evolution story there, which is interesting to see where we are going. What is the future of the PPM? Does Gartner and other folks that predict some of this going to be disrupted? Is that really true? And the thing aspect for many of you could be of interest, could be not of interest also if you're from the non-tech background, but it'll still impact you in one way or the other. Is to look at technology disruption, largely focusing on IoT, AI, cloud. Really, how is that impacting, and automation? How is that really impacting the areas that we're working? So, of course, in terms of the technology development, there's a lot of work, but in the project management area, what's being done so far? So that's a question that is not as obvious. It's not as clear. So it's something we are seeing evolution on. You will see later in the presentation there are some tall claims that organizations make, and some of it we see in the proof of the pudding. We'll share the videos with you, and you will see some of these smaller companies are now working quite a lot with respect to be it AI, be it IoT, or in IoT's case, a lot of large companies as well. But there are IoT and AI as well as on the cloud. There are small companies that are beginning to do some really interesting things. So I keep that in, we can keep that in mind. The other is, of course, the question on skills. What does the future entail? What do we need to, what's the next certification we should be doing? I'm sure you're ragging Suma and Venkat and others on it. For me, more important than maybe even the certification is what are the kind of skills we have to build? Are our skills going to be completely replaced? Are we at risk in terms of project management? So on and so forth. So I'm hoping, even if I don't answer all your questions very clearly, there could be some direction that you may get, and really that becomes a starting point for you to start looking further. Sorry. So we start with the portfolio evolution. So what's been happening in the portfolio, in a portfolio itself? What project mix that we are seeing? When I say project mix, if you went maybe 10 years back, maybe even 15 years back, largely, if you look at the top three pictures, largely you could categorize, independent of the industry that you were in, you could say that there were some projects that were completely requirements or regulatory projects, which you obviously have no scope, no option but to deliver. You had some operational projects, which were to ensure that your working of your organization is effective, is better, is improved. And then on the right hand side, if you look, there are strategic projects, which were primarily aligned to the organization's strategy, the portfolio strategy, which is largely aligned, should ideally be aligned to the organization strategy. So in very broad terms, again, languages and nomenclature could change across industry, could change across the times, but these were kind of very broadly, and we can slice and dice the project mix in many ways, but broadly one could have defined them this way. And just stepping back, why are we discussing this? Why am I talking about the project mix? Is in this part, what we are kind of discussing is what are the things that are making the project portfolio complex? What is it that's making it? What is the need for it to become hybrid? Why are we calling it even hybrid? So what we're trying to see is what are the different axes on which you can see some of these portfolios, right? Or the project mix in the portfolio. So if you look at the last 5, 8, maybe even 10 years, one of the switch that's happened, or one of the buzzwords that everyone tends to talk about is innovation. And of course, in the technology space, especially in the software development, it's agile. But and we'll come to that. But if I stick just to the innovation part, largely, if you look at the bottom two pictures, you either have largely incremental innovation. So you start with a stone wheel and you go to whatever your Seat or Yokohama or whichever tire. So there's a gradual incremental innovation, and then you have obviously more disruptive innovation or more transformation-based innovation, for which the practical example that everyone likes to give is the butterfly, the formation of the transformation of the butterfly from the cocoon. So what's happened is that because you have now this eclectic mix of projects, it is no longer very easy for you to talk about in a consistent way about the timelines of the project, about the return on investment of the project, about the methodology you will pick for the project, about what is the resourcing mechanism for the project, what is the kind of partnership you get into the project. In every case, it's varied. And if your portfolio has an equivalent mix or has a representation of one or more, in fact, I would say more than 3 of these, you're quite challenged in trying to bring a consistent view in decision making, in deciding what percentage of your portfolio will have what. So it's a difficult decision. Organizations today even struggle saying what percentage of my innovation should be, innovation projects should be incremental and what should be transformational. So it's not an easy pick. It also is so aligned to the organization strategy that you have to keep adapting it depending on the roadmap, depending on the evolution. So that I think is the first area where I see a lot of complexity coming in, and for us to be able, for us to need to adapt to it. Sorry. So the next one I think is a lot more obvious. You would have all seen varied versions of this. So in terms of the methodologies or the project management models that we have, it's also a mixed bag today. So I hope all of you are still able to hear me. I'm just doing a sound check right in the middle.
Yes, Karthik, we can.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank. So there are these. I'm sure aware of one more or all. We all started some point with the waterfall model. A lot of the construction, manufacturing, oil and gas, supply chain based industries still tend to work on it, and for absolutely obvious reasons. In the tech industry, largely there's a disruption here through agile, and there are very varied flavors of agile, and of course as the tech industry is used to doing, they're also pushing this to the other domains. So if you talk about Boeing or any other organization, just as an example, maybe Boeing, then a lot of the design activities today are run on agile, and the construction continues to be on a sequential model, whether it's waterfall or it's an industry or it's construction project management. So again, we discussed innovation in parts. Again, there is no specific methodology, or there are, I would say, multiple methodologies that are used. Startups, when they do innovation, tend to use things like Lean Canvas and processes around it. Design thinking is one area that's very popular when companies that do product management. Again, historically, processes like Lean are still around. The SAFe models like SAFe are kind of saying we should include concepts like Lean and DevOps, which is largely development and operations working together. Okay, I think there's one member that's not able to join, so maybe we can get them in.
We'll take care, Karthik. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think this is again a view to you that this is getting more and more complex. There are many options. It's the question that I often ask, and I get varied answers. For example, is disciplined agile better versus safe, rather not better, but which is the way to go, and what is the advantage that discipline agile brings to the table as compared to say safe. So obviously these are very obvious questions, and many of you are already discovering these, but again, if you compare the scaled models, what is a good option to go with, which is the context to go for this. So again, just like the project mix, the methodologies are becoming a mixed bag, and it's creating a lot of complexity for us. And so therefore, if you take the project mix and the methodology both, that adds to the complexity further. Oops. So this survey is a bit dated, and I think there is a lot of content after this, but it's interesting. I mean, this was done by Hybrid PM with a selected set of project managers, so it's still a limited view. But I kind of wanted to share with you in terms of what is the real challenge in having a hybrid portfolio. So and in today's COVID scenario, this is very kind of become very relevant, right? With the fact that largely in the traditional models, the requirements were at least relatively clear. They were certain. Your approach that you had was also well defined. Whereas if you take some of the other parts of the portfolio, if you take innovation methodologies, or if you take agile, the uncertainty is high, and I mean largely they're used when the uncertainty is high, and your approach can evolve, which means whatever approach you took probably in the first phase of the project is may or may not apply later on. So that I think is a point to note. Clearly, if you look at the answers that some of these guys have given, it's quite interesting. Particularly if if you see, everybody seems to be deciding on their own on how they will merge these methodologies together. So somebody is saying that each department has decided for themselves. Some are saying that it's decided at each project level. And some people are saying there are different methods for sub-projects as well. I mean, one of the approaches seems to be that you do rough planning on traditional, and then you go into agile or another methodology for a more detail. So the response I'm trying to share with you is kind of giving you the view of how complicated this is getting. That's the primary part, because no one seems to, we are not getting consistent answers. We're not getting the same answers, and which may be fair because organizations are different, but really the way it is getting implemented is very varied, and that is that's a challenge, because even at an organization level, often you look at benchmarks in industry, across industries, and it becomes very difficult for you to then see what are best practices, how do you leverage that, leave alone the challenge within your organization. So yeah. So the other aspect, again, I will touch upon this briefly. This is a reasonably complex topic. Is when we do selection of projects across portfolios, this is also an aspect that adds complexity to what to the portfolio completely. So and there are various mechanisms. Again, I mean for the part of this discussion or this presentation, I mean, I'm not going to go into the deep of each of these, but I'll touch upon a couple of them. But interestingly, if you move from a more incremental, more radical project management need, or let's say from an incremental project to a more radical project, the ways in which you do project selection or portfolio selection is very different. So I mean, historically, if you look at the very incremental mechanisms, those are largely financial. So you could look at profitability, as an option. Then in certain cases where your projects dealt with projects, you could look at things like optional pricing, which could be what is your product strategy, or what is your pricing strategy, what is the product selling price, your versus purchasing price, factors like that. So those could drive your priority in a portfolio. Then you went to strategic and scenario based, which means you develop varied scenarios for your organization. You didn't want to, you moved from more, I would say, a single parameter, single approach basis to multi-dimensional approach. So profitability no longer was the only driver for the project selection. But possibly you could look at the risk exposure versus the profitability versus some other parameter. In recent times, if you look at it, a lot of at an organization, people look at the sustainability of the project, the alignment to strategy, the risk exposure and appetite, and then the financial metrics. So then you get into much more complicated mechanisms. And then the more radical you go where you're not, it's an innovation project, you don't know what the future is going to entail, or it may be in the current scenario also, if you're not able to entail or see what is going to happen in 6 months, 8 months time, you do things like information gap. You basically say, okay, what do I know today, what is needed, and what is the gap, and that you proceed based on which projects you will pick. So that's like information gap. That's the mechanism you could take. And so there is this eclectic mix again of port selection mechanisms linked to the kind of projects that you do and your so it's linked to the project mix, it's linked to the methodology you use, but it adds to the complexity portfolio. So that's also something that is adding to this chaos. I mean, it's like someone said, this is like an organized chaos. And I was talking to one of my team members today, and they use this phrase. So I'm sure you've heard it before, but I was kind of relating all of this to it. So we've organized ourselves, but then there are too many options to play around with, and if we don't have clear direction on our portfolio objectives, then we really struggle. And of course, it doesn't end here. So it doesn't end here. There's more. When you start looking at the ROI calculations of projects and trying to see that and kind of measure that up and consolidate that at a portfolio level. I mean, I have not dwelled on the financial models that can be used in terms of the ROI calculations, but that's one more aspect. But definitely you'll have to look at, what is the kind of risk management assumptions you've made? Does your organization look at soft versus hard savings? What are the scenarios that are relevant to your organization? And again, in the overall resource management area, how does what are the kind of partners and internal resources you're working with? What kind, how is the allocation managed? These problems already exist. It's not something new. And of course, interestingly, I put the types of human resources, but I just put that to kind of bring one flavor, which is apart from all the human resource management that we do, a lot of the organizations are now putting bots in place, and we start to have to look at how our fellow humans are performing, and we have to then independently look at if there are bots deployed, how they are performing. Obviously, the activities they do are different and maybe more simplistic. And the way that is measured is different. So the efficiency that they bring, and then how do we bring all of that together and bring a view? So I think these are all complexities that have evolved. If I have to say crystal ball perspective, I don't tend to see a change in the next 5 years in this space. You will see some consolidation in terms of these practices. Whether it's the project mix or others. I don't see a singular unified field theory kind of thing coming in, which will encompass all of this. So we will still have a very differentiated, dissected portfolio. I definitely think for the next 5 years. If you ask me on a 10-year horizon, I will be very candid. I do not think I can say where we will be, but definitely on that medium horizon, I think this is where we will be. Somebody had a question on saying why bots are considered as humans. No, I'll stand corrected there. I just put that and mark that I don't think we consider them as the same. But the only point is that there are some activities that they take up which may be historically be done by humans. And therefore, when you're trying to manage a project, you are managing bots as well as people. So, but you, as from the project success perspective, you will have to look at both, and it's again an evolving area on how we are able to do that. A lot of organizations that are very advanced in the robotic process automation area are are quite skilled and capable of synergizing these, but that's not true for everyone. So just to correct, while I put there, I marked it in red just to say that it's not the same, but I'm just saying it's an element that's coming into play now, which you will need to take into account as well. I hope that answered the question. Okay, so that ingest was ingest rather, not just ingest was the portfolio, hybrid portfolio that we are seeing today, and this will evolve further. Again, and I'm not touching upon some aspects like the technology disruption, because there is an area we are focusing fully on, but interestingly, those are also aspects like IoT sensors, again, maybe bots linked to that, artificial intelligence. Those are also components that will come into your projects or into the portfolio, and we'll have to see how we are able to align, integrate, and work with these components. So the next one is really the project portfolio management tools, and I couldn't help myself using this picture, kind of reminding us of the with a pinch of salt and a sense of humor. So I mean, I am sure all of you have worked with some, or not all of you, many of you may have worked with portfolio management tools over the last many years. Some of you may not have. But largely, what are portfolio project management tools? They are tools that provide us an automated way of defining our portfolios, defining projects within our projects and programs within our portfolios, plan them, execute them, and then review and monitor. So it's an integrated tool that is kind of which gives you a view of the portfolio, and then the portfolios can obviously be then consolidated for you to see organizational views on your overall project management performance and project performance. So in a way, I call it the I mean, my personal view, I call it the ERP of the project world. So if you have to kind of form that analogy. So Gartner usually does a magic quadrant for the product world. So most of the tech products that come out, Gartner does every year a magic quadrant. The quadrant is normally it's a 4-blocker with the X. If for those of you, and I apologize if obviously many of you may have seen it before, but for those of you who haven't, it basically talks about how the various vendors that provide these products, and it's divided into 4 areas, which is niche players, visionaries, challengers, and leaders. The leaders are obvious. They're the ones that are leading this this segment, and it's based on their ability to execute their product. So it's that they have a complete product vision and their ability to deliver on that vision. So this is how it's defined. So if we go, let's say about 15 years back in 2005, I picked the the IT project and portfolio management magic one. And in future slides, I'll talk about the last 3 years and kind of try to fit the puzzle together. So largely, I think in between 2000 and 2010, I would say, we had a lot of the traditional software biggywigs that were there as part of providing, being these vendors. So Oracle's, SAP, IBM were all kind of in this magic quadrant. And then there were obviously niche players also. Many of you may have heard of Niku, PlanView, Planisware are, if you will see recently, are among the leaders now in this market. And so really this is just a view, and you will see that, for example, in 2010, the niche players had begun to come quite a lot. If you see that it's a very crowded and busy place in the right hand side. Let me just see if I can enable the pointers. Sorry. Yeah. So if you look at this part, it's quite busy. Similarly, if you see these two, it seems to be quite busy. So in this period, we saw a lot of newcomers into the market, and we saw generally the adoption of PPM growing quite a lot. So in correlation, we saw a lot of new players also coming. Sorry, just bear with me. Sorry about. Yikes! My mouse has disappeared. Okay, sorry about that. So what was happening? So if you look at it, there were a lot of new entrants in the consolidation, especially in the niche players and the visionaries. What was happening functionally was a lot of portfolios had, I mean, the functionality that largely provided during this period was, portfolio definitions, having integrated reporting and dashboarding. It started looking at various aspects like planning portfolios, to managing work execution, workflows, collaboration mechanisms. All of this started coming into the PPM slowly. Some products be having strengths in one of these areas, and some having strengths in other areas. Now what's happened in the last 3 years? Quickly, and I apologize for the quality of this slide. If I'm sure when I share it, I'll try to give you a better version. But what's interesting here, if you look at it, is in 2017-18, and I will show you 19 on the next slide. You will see that there is actually not much change. You are seeing CA Technologies, PlanView, ChangePoint, Planisware. Those are the leaders. If you look at these 2 years, and quickly, if we go to 2019, it is exactly the same. Broadcom acquired CA Technologies, and that's the only change you will see in the leaders quadrant. Again, in the challengers quadrant also, there is much lesser change. What you will see is a lot of new entrants in the visionary and in the niche players are bring agile portfolio capabilities, and that's one area that we see growing quite a lot here. So if you look at these 3 graphs, I mean, largely you could come to the conclusion that, hey, nothing much is happening here. These the leaders seem to be where they are. The product, does it mean that the product is stable? There's nothing much happening. At the surface, yes, but I think in the background there is a lot of largely a lot of the large PPMs are worried about companies that are kind of bringing in complete agile capabilities in terms of the portfolio in terms of the portfolio tools, and they kind of want to make sure that they have that capability inbuilt. So obviously some of them are building it in-house, some of them are acquiring. So I would say the trigger points here are obvious: agile, cloud, bots, analytics, AI. These are 5 triggers that are changing this product landscape. Also, historically, many of these products were on SaaS models, on subscription-based models. They've just now moved to the cloud, which makes it easier, faster, and again, arguably cheaper. And of course, as I said, a lot of the new companies are bringing in agile portfolio capability, and even scaled agile. And obviously, a lot of these tools are enabling chatbots within their product, and AI also is interestingly coming up. So I think it's PlanView, which is one of the leaders, is recently acquired, not recently, maybe a year and a half back, acquired a company called Aptage, which is, and there's a video later showing you what kind of app, not showing Aptage, but some similar company. But again, there's a link for you to go if you want to go and see what Aptage does and how they deliver AI to the PPM world. Then that could be something interesting. So others like Planisware, Broadcom, ChangePoint, some of them are adapting and building their AI capabilities internally as well. I'm focusing on the leaders, but primarily due to to manage time. But again, if you have any specific questions on any of the ones, I'm happy to answer them now or later. Kind of what's kind of happening in the PPM world in terms of the tools. I don't know if anyone has any question at this point because we are shifting to a different topic. So if anyone's has any question on either of the two. Okay. So the third, I think, aspect that we are discussing today is primarily technology disruption, and here's where all my videos are. So please do go through them when you have time offline. Largely, even PMI surveys that PMI did in terms of, I think they did it in 2018. Identified the top 3 technology disruptors in the project management world. So according to them, cloud computing, Internet of Things, IoT, and AI are, according to this study rather, this is what it is, which seems to be in line with a lot of what everyone else. We'll quickly dive to the next slide. Okay, so yeah, I would have liked to with AI, but I think somebody said I lost your voice. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Karthik.
Okay,
in between,
sure.
just 1 minute back, your voice was lost, but otherwise we can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
I think there's some bandwidth issue. There is some bandwidth issue on your side. If you can switch off your video, that is also all right.
Okay. Okay, is it better?
Yeah, it is better. Actually, we can hear you now.
Okay, sure. Apologies for that. So we start with IoT, and I think it's an interesting area, and I think more than the technology world in construction and manufacturing, this is a lot. There's a lot of discussion. If you've not looked at the Gartner hype cycle before, I again apologize. Since I'm bringing some technology concepts, I need for us to be kind of synced on that. Otherwise, you will not coming up next. So Gartner every year produces, or sometimes at least every year produces a hype cycle on a particular technology. So it's talking about where is the hype around, and this is in the English word hype. So what the particular technology. So whether you take IoT or you take cloud or you take AI, where are the various components placed, and they've defined it's a maturity curve that tells you where that particular technology is in terms of its maturity or its journey. So largely it starts, there are 5 points in the maturity hype cycle. The first is largely, of course, it's an immature idea or a concept that's that's identified that it can be used for differentiation, for competitive differentiation. Then you get to a point where you have a first generation of products. It's not scaled. It requires customization. It's high priced. Then you come to a point where it's you come to a point, a trough actually, where many technologies die. So it's a challenging period between when the first version of the products come up and then it goes into this. So you see many of them dying away, others retaining. They are able to get a potential audience for full adoption, and then it matures to going into a full-fledged product. So just keep that in mind. As you move through the hype cycle, the maturity of the product increases and the risk in the product's failure reduces, or the risk of the product not going through reduces. So just keep that in mind. I'm kind of giving you this because I am trying to tell you where the technology is today. And so we need to be conscious of the fact that when we talk about these technologies, it's not one aspect. There are various things to it. And the other is, of course, that they are in various stage of maturity. So again, I don't want you to worry about the technology terms and things like that. Some of you may be familiar, and I'm not going to go through everything. I'll just touch upon one or two for you to get a sense of it. Interestingly, what you should know is that the 5 areas are actually have a specific name. So when you start off, it's called an innovation trigger. Then it goes to a peak of inflated expectations. Then it goes to trough of disillusionment, which is where you will see products failing. And then you go to slope of enlightenment, which is you start onboarding customers, and then you go into plateau of productivity, which is where you go to a stable product or stable technology, I would say. So this is in 2019. This is the hype cycle on Internet of Things. I'm just going to touch on a couple of things for you to understand. The one that you look at it on the right hand side, which is white. Again, it's interesting for you to look at the colors. White basically means that it will reach mainstream within 2 years. Light blue is 2 to 5 years. Dark blue is 5 to 10 years. The triangle with yellow is more than 10 years. And if there is some product, if any of these gets obsolete, then obviously there's a mark. So in this cycle, there's nothing like that. But I would touch upon just 2 or 3. One, the indoor location for assets. So a lot of assets, sensors, that you see in your buildings, that you see in your factories, which kind of track the movement of, it could be people, it could be goods. That is kind of the example of indoor location for assets. That is very mature now. You have, in airports, if you go, there are beacons that can track various activities. So that is, I think, an important aspect for you to gather. That's quite mature, and that's why you will see a lot of implementation. Interestingly, if I take the whole of Internet of Things, it's somewhere in the blue. Just for you to kind of know, I can try showing. Wait, sorry about that. That was not what I was trying to do. Apologies for that. Sorry. I need to go to the previous. Sorry about that. Yeah. So if you can see the Internet of Things right above the autonomous vehicles, that's kind of a complete view of where IoT is. So largely, in terms of mainstreaming, about 5 to 10 years away. Also called trough of disillusionment. So you could see a lot of companies failing, a lot of technologies failing, and then for it to come through. The other one, of course, could be interest autonomous vehicles. Everyone talks about it. All the big tech players talk about it, but largely there are a lot of challenges. Not just, and I'm not talking about legal or regulatory, but even technological challenges that are needed for it to kind of move ahead. So the horizon here is more 5 to 10 years, and that's what I would like you to keep in mind. And then hopefully, yeah, so there are a couple of videos here. I would like to play them for you, but since that's not working, I'll kind of talk through. Couple of, when you understand IoT, it's also things, you need to understand what are the kinds of IoTs that are happening. Obviously, I'm sure many of you are using light fixtures that can be voice activated through Alexa or someone else. You're using some home appliances or someone's using some home appliances that are responding to this. So fixtures like these are more consumer fixtures. They are on a they're right now limited, and largely that's not the area that has grown so much, as I understand. The area that has largely grown a lot is the industrial Internet of Things, and to some extent commercial IoT. And obviously, when we talk about commercial IoT, it's more in terms of healthcare. And now you will see with post-COVID that there are many use cases that are coming into play, or with COVID ongoing, I shouldn't say post-COVID. And again, there are a lot of monitoring systems that are needed in these areas. I mean, the industrial Internet of Things is what I was wanting to talk to you in the video. On the top right-hand side is what it is. It's an example of Honeywell and how they've implemented this, in a petrochemical factory, and how remote monitoring can happen, how there are multiple sensors, and you're able to take decisions based on the data that the IoT is able to provide you. And the one at the bottom is more on buildings. That's one of the areas that has really, I think, picked up early as compared to some of the other areas or other domains. So building management is an area where we see IoT kind of moving fast. And of course, in military, some of it is confidential and obviously not very clearly visible to everyone. But yeah, I mean, some of the cases are that you could have devices or robots that you could obviously control remotely, and there could be human wearable biometrics. So in fact, there is a, I don't know whether I included this in the slide, but one of the areas that's also happening is wearables. So you could have a chip or a sensor that that's put inside your skin, and for example, one of the areas that's really looking at that is payments. So a chip, you are able to do your payment maybe even without using a phone. So that's, I think in Sweden there's been an experiment with about 3,000 people that that are doing that, and one of the applications I understand is in the payments field. So sorry, video, apologies again. Sorry about that. So how is IoT changing? Changing. I'm keeping a time check on the time, and I think we'll have to move a little fast. So how is IoT impacting project management? And there are multiple views today. I have tried to show you a couple of them. In my view, neither is addressing everything, but just to get a sense. So if you look at the title, largely the areas I see is analytics. You get a lot of data from remote places, places which are not necessarily safe for employees. This could be oil fields, this could be construction locations, and so you have a lot of sensors that can send you data, and you can do a lot of deep analytics, predictive analytics, and be able to, and that's closely linked to process control in many of these areas to ensure that there's compliance to the process, there's compliance to safety, and overall you're able to do better resource management, better resource allocation on this. And in terms of the safety and the process control aspects, especially in the cost of some of these incidents where there is loss of resource or people, is much more. And when we talk about reducing costs, it's not just this, but it's also the credibility of the organization in case of such incidents. So that's an area that's I think also picking up. Okay, I know Suma and Venkat had mentioned to me that maybe 3 to 4 weeks back there was a detailed session on AI. There was a dive, and I was very keen to attend it, but I missed it. So I'll try to be very brief. This is more a view on how AI is getting implemented in some project management areas. So again, I apologize. The videos are there for you to see, and my focus is more on showing you what kind of products can people use. So that's largely that. So Gartner actually claimed, I think, a couple of years back that project management will get eliminated in its current form by 2030, and that's a claim they made. And of course, there are multiple points of view on that, but this is what they claim. Again, my personal view is eliminated is a very strong word. Again, many of oops, I'm so sorry. Yeah. So many of you may already know this, but largely when I'm talking about AI, it's machine learning, it's deep learning, it's visual recognition, and it's speech, the NLP, so natural language processing. So if you look at that, just for you to get a sense, if you don't know this, then the example of machine learning largely is it's able to give you predictive, it's able to look at your pattern, your behavior pattern, is able to predict what you should be, that watch something similar to you has also watched. So it's giving you recommendations based on that learning process. NLP is very obvious. You can take the code. Waymo is a company, I think, which is a Google spin-off that's looking largely at, I think, self-driven vehicles and is using a lot of deep learning algorithms. And to me, if you simply have to understand that, I would just say that deep learning is a very, very complex way of doing machine learning, and multiple parameters, multiple facets when you look at it. And again, visual recognition, something like Google Lens, which is which will do image recognition and be able to, based on that image recognition, is able to provide you various sets of information for decision making linked to the images that you see. Project management. Largely in 5 areas. This is a study done by PwC, which was focused both for the Middle East, but also for a global audience. And they felt these were the 5 areas: business insights, risk management, human capital optimization, action taker, and active assistant. So these are the 5 areas. Action taker, I will talk to you at the end of this section, but maybe I'll just briefly touch upon the other 4. Business insights, I think are quite clear. You get better information, faster information, better data. I wouldn't say information, which you are able to derive insights. You can have virtual assistants that take away the activity of doing research for you and are able to bring you certain content. There are many companies and some PPNs that are already using AI to have optimized schedules. And obviously with the enhanced data, you have better ability to define your portfolios. So you can, while I was talking to you about portfolio selection earlier, your portfolio can not just be quantitative now, but it could have some kind of fuzzy logic built into it. So it's not just saying it's financial. So if I have to put risk, then it's, what are the risk parameters? It's not all quantitatively defined. There is a you can create, and that's the direction that or the portfolio management will go if they adapt. Yes. And they have a product called Auto Schedule, and it's quite interesting. It's basically able to real time. You can go and create various project scenarios. You can modify, live the project plan and manage any change request. And then it will, and based on your inputs on resourcing and other things, it will automatically, it has the intelligence to give you the best schedules, the best resource allocation, and give you multiple scenarios. So it's quite an interesting tool. I encourage you to kind of go and look at it in your free time. I'm again clicking the video. The other area that I see in project management that's getting impacted is risk management. So if you take the COVID scenario, a lot of the people, including me, did not take the COVID scenario into a lot of our portfolio planning, our project management planning areas. And obviously that's a challenge. But there are products, and one of them I'm talking about is Engine. Again, these are not my personal recommendations on the products. There could be others. These are the ones I've looked at, and I'm happy to share. Please share back if you think there are some products that are doing better than this. But largely, what you will have ability to do is you levels of resource planning. You can define multiple horizons. If for your portfolio or project you want to see a scenario for 1 to 3 years versus 5 years versus 6 months, you could build multiple horizons. You have multiple planning algorithms, which means you can define which is the highest project priority. How will you want to do, or do you want to do it based on the resource allocation or based on the availability of resources, or it could be a bespoke way of defining the portfolio, or it could be a combination of all of this. So these tools, it helps you do a lot better scenario planning real time than we've seen before. This one, largely due to my PMO background, I'm quite keen on, is that there's a company called PMO Auto AI, and they have a product and which basically if you want to on your plan, if you want to add tasks, and let's say just hypothetically that you have a EPMO which is Microsoft based, just as an example, you want to update all your tasks, you can go into the chatbot, the app, and you can just send a one-line request or a specific nomenclature that you need to follow. You can add risks, you can define KPIs, do reporting, customer reports, define the project charter, everything on the chat window, and it gets integrated into your whatever your tool is, whatever portfolio management, project management tool is. Microsoft Dynamics also has an ability. It has a chatbot. So, some companies are implementing it, where you can do with the chatbot. You again have a set of preset defined and instructions, which obviously the chatbot will learn and can evolve if you see the need. So again, these are interesting videos. Do look at them. And yeah, so the other area is human resource optimization. So I'm just going to kind of skip to the next slide to tell you how AI in the in ops works and how you can do human optimization. So if you look at a lot of the e-commerce area and in any area for that matter, but if I take that example, the availability of the systems and the applications is of critical importance. If you're a Flipkart or you're a retail company that's doing that and you're helping those organizations, then in the traditional setup of operations, the way it works is, let's say in your infrastructure there's a network link that's broken, similar to the challenge or a more complicated version of the challenge I was facing. I had bandwidth issues, but let's say the network link is flapping and it's going to go down, let's say in 10 minutes. And because of that, let's say the application that your customer is going to use is going to go down in 10 minutes, and the business transaction that is going to go through will fail within 18 minutes. So the idea is that now you have AI in a lot of the network infrastructure area, which can predict and tell you predictably when your network link is going to fail, and you switch over to a backup, and you could ensure and inform the applications team and the business transactions team so that they are aware if they have to do, if you're not able to switch, they are able to do that manually, or they're able to tell the customer, wait for another 20 minutes and we'll bring it back. So the point being that, rather than you facing a business incident, which means you're not able to do the business transaction due to a technology failure, the technology is predictably telling you that. So the set of resources and people that is getting applied to an incident after it happens vis-a-vis something you're doing predictably is very different. So a lot of optimization can happen here, and the front-ending teams in marketing, sales, and support should see a lot of benefit, and this is something that is getting applied quite a lot in the technology space. Okay, I am again keeping a watch on the time because I want some time for. So the last one on the technology is cloud. I guess all of you know again. Just to kind of give you a quick view of what Gartner talks about in terms of the cloud computing hype cycle. If you look at it, this is a much mature space than what we've seen in terms of IoT and AI, and a lot of the areas are well understood. But still, a lot of these technology areas are evolving and doing more. So and one of the areas I think it was on the AI one, but also impacts cloud is edge IT, which is also about distributing your technology across various devices and not restricting it to the cloud. Kind of helps on latency. So technologies like that are also coming now. But largely, if you look at the cloud space, it's in the 2 to 5, less than 2 years to 2 to 5 years. So I would say between 0 to 2 years time frame. So you would largely see this evolving, and most of the technology is in a, let's say, past the slope of enlightenment. So it's much more stabilized. Again, I mean, this is obvious. These are like the kind of cloud deployments that we have. They're public, hybrid, private, and community clouds. I will. But quickly on the challenges and the impact on project management, largely, I mean, the benefits are known, I think. I mean, cloud is still a relatively new technology, so there's a lot of argument and discussions on the long-term cost saving that cloud does bring. But if we leave that aside and we assume that that's the case in the long term, it does bring a lot of benefit. There's ease of activity, ease of work, ease of doing projects. You're able to do innovation quite easily. You are able to reduce your capex costs, capital expenditure costs on IT. Rather, you move it from a capex to an opex. Apologies, which means your one-time costs are reduced rather than and maybe repetitive costs are much lesser, but it's ongoing. So, and it's distributed, so you're not paying one-time huge amounts. But there are some challenges, especially around the model is also in cloud, is that you get on the cloud, then you kind of experiment and figure out your projects and things like that. So it's much more from the, let's say, from the previous model of try before. This is more you buy the product and then you start experimenting rather than try before you buy. And then there's the concept of viral cloud and basically boundaries. So largely, it's not easy to define project boundaries because there are various plugins, there are various third-party applications and vendors and that are going on. And what is the data exchange? What is the level of data exchange? What is the level of access? A lot of organizations are finding post facto that there are gaping holes in their approach. So this is something that projects need to be very careful because the ability to scale is there. It's the governance and security are something that get challenged. And so quickly, I mean, this slide doesn't actually show combined impact, but I was wanting to show. But really, the thing that we should be observing is what is the combined impact of these 4 or 5 technologies, rather than just looking at them individually. And that's the thought I'd like to leave you with also. And so AI with IoT, is going to make a larger impact than AI individually. And that's the kind of thing we have to look at in terms of the use cases that apply to project management as well. Is that changing anything? I mean, we are seeing some technologies like AI working with IoT, definitely IoT and the cloud, but a convergence in terms of these technologies and giving us some very direct solutions, we have to see. But definitely that is out there. Okay, I think I will finish in 5 minutes. I think this is important, so I can skip it. In terms of the skills, so what is the future of the skills? I mean, there are multiple discussions on this topic, but it's a tough one. In one organization that I was working with earlier, there was a complete 2-year exercise on what roles need to be, what skills need to be kept for the future, let's say 5 or 8 years, and which are the ones. and despite significant efforts, we didn't come to very specific conclusions. So it's not very easy to predict this, but few inputs for you. I think PMI did a job growth survey, and for the period of 2017 to 2020. So you have to keep in mind the caveat that this was done pre-COVID, and the impacts of COVID are not fully seen, but largely is giving us a good message. If you look at it, in many parts of the world, there is the current talent on project management is aging. So there is need for skilled professionals. People like me obviously are the ones that they're calling aging, and there's a lot of young people, a lot of talented people that are there and are looking to these opportunities. And again, in terms of the gap, if you look at it, it's across sectors in manufacturing, in construction, in financial services, oil and gas, information services, all of them. And interestingly, if you look at it, the left, the bottom right graph talks about which countries are the ones that are kind of going to have, let's say, a gap. And really, you will see that India is one which is good and bad news. Obviously, there is opportunity, but how we take care of, how do we address that opportunity over the next 7 years in this case, but even over the next 10 years is the key question. So there's good news, but we need to, how do we move? Just quickly bringing the COVID context into this. This is a study that one of the consulting firms did with all the tech, R&D global capability centers in India. And the interesting point for you to be aware of that program and project management still remains to be one of, let's say, one of the work areas or one of the skills or one of the activities that is very prone to remote working. So with the world shifting, at least in the short term and in the medium term, to a more digitized remote working mechanism, and with organizations taking some taking larger leaps, some smaller ones in this area, we still see that this is an area where you work remotely and not be impacted very significantly. So largely, if you look at this graph, it talks about that the impact was largely positive, and it's one of the, in terms of ease of working, it's one of the most suitable roles. So that's something to keep in mind. Question, this is again a study that PwC did, largely keeping AI in mind, but we could kind of use the other technologies also. So in a way, what they're talking about is how is the PM's role going to change? The PM will not just, what will be the things that the PM will not do? So probably in terms of doing a lot of the analytics, doing real-time analysis, optimizing schedules, improving portfolios, what we talked about, resource allocation, human capital optimization, maybe the status reporting. All these are areas that are possibly, you're not going to be as involved. You may still be, but you're not going to possibly be as involved. Again, the horizon for this, I would say, is interestingly, in this study, I think in a related study, which I think KPMG did, they talked about whether there would be a complete replacement of the project manager, and that study quite categorically said that even in the next years, it doesn't see that will happen. So clearly, you will, the areas that you'll need to getting maybe yourself strengthened is collaboration, having emotional intelligence, being able to take data-driven decisions, have understanding of data science, possibly some technology. Not that we expect everyone to be hands-on, but at least this study wasn't indicating that. But it's more, are you able to advocate the technology? Are you able to take course corrections based on it? Are you able to, or you could also be an authority on the technology. These are varied things that you could do. But as I would say, is legal and regulatory knowledge, negotiation, security. I think security and legal are more and more becoming very important for project managers, and they need to be skilled in this area. With all these, not just with these technologies coming in, with regulations on these technologies and regulations otherwise, like data privacy across various countries, it's becoming essential that we get skilled in these areas. So again, I would say the picture is, this is more recast. I will skip that one, just the last slide. Again, this is not my recommendation. In terms of what's happened in the learning area with these technologies, I have not gone through any of these trainings, so please don't take my word for it. But what I'm trying to say is that, some of the skills that we talked about the future, things like emotional intelligence, communication, stakeholder management, those are areas that organizations have well invested into or are in the process of investing. But largely I see that the technology area, especially with respect to technology related to project management, say AI related to PM or cloud related to project management, I don't see too many learning capabilities being built there or learning options being there. The one on the top left is the first one I have seen, and I may be wrong. This is just a, just maybe a window for you to go and see if there is something more there, and I'd really be happy if you can share and you found something else. But for example, the one on the top right hand side, which is a data science course on Udemy, but I generally think it's a very superficial course. And again, the one on the bottom right side, which is on project cloud management, is for Oracle, it's done by Oracle, and it's maybe largely more internal to them. Possibly they also do it externally, I don't know. But again, the contents are still evolving the way I see it. I mean, cloud is still stable, but on data science, AI, maybe IoT, specific trainings around the project management link, I don't see too many. So therefore, it correlates to where they are in their maturity cycle also. So that's a view, and that's it from my end. I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Karthik. I will now leave the floor open for questions. And that was a very insightful session on hybrid portfolios, the future, really a crystal gazing into it actually gave a preview of all the skills of the future. Thank you so much for that. So let's take some questions here. Amarendra asks, where does SAP stand now?
Good question. So I think I don't have a good answer. I don't think this, and you're talking about the PM. I think they're definitely not there in the leaders today. I think also SAP is more domain specific also, and I think they have multiple product sets. So I can come back with you with a specific answer. I don't know which segment they are today in. Maybe if I can go back and see, but I can definitely come back to you with an answer on that. But they're definitely they're more diversified in terms of their product set of products. So it's probably going to be difficult for us to put SAP as a whole into that. That's how I see it. I don't know if you have a different, and you can share that if you think there is a different view.
Okay. While we are at that, we will go on to the next question. With the disruption of technologies, the life of the hype cycle is also getting reduced. Everyone doing the left shift, and it is becoming tough times to keep learning. What do you suggest here? That's by Rajshekhar.
Okay, thanks, Rajshekhar. That's a good question. I really, that is something on the hype cycle. I'll leave Gartner to answer it. But you're right. You're right that the hype cycles are reducing, and one of the risks we run, and for any product management today, that the number of versions that we generate and the number of new products that we come up with is significantly and possibly exponentially higher than in the past. I don't know whether Gartner is really shortening its cycle, but organizations to do in much shorter terms, and which is why you will see that releases today, they are very and maybe that's linked to the whole agile way of working. But that's one of the drivers there, that is much more incremental within the current product, and then look at more disruptive. So I see that is a risk if the hype cycle continues to shrink, because customer expectations are always very high in these areas. But and a case in point is, and I haven't shown here, but is kind of blockchain. For example, if you look at blockchain's hype cycle, we are still very far away, because apart from the financial services industry, we don't see too many use cases, and that working use cases. So what you say exists, and we have to be wary of the fact that if it's further shortening, there is a there's a challenge and a risk to the stability of what's coming out.
Sure. Thank you, Karthik. In the interest of time, I will ask one more question from one more of our participants. How IoT and AI would be helpful in healthcare industry?
Okay. Good question. I think even in the COVID scenario, for example, and you can find a lot of examples. But a lot of the at least, I mean, I'm not taking necessarily an Indian example, but even globally, there are a lot of cases where the patients were being reviewed and looked at remotely by the doctor, right? And if you look at it, a lot of people are averse to walking into the hospital. So a lot of a combination of a sensor or set of devices at your home with the ability for AI to be on top, to be able to interpret some of that data and predictively advise you while you may be able to reach the doctor or not, is to me a very simplistic use case. But I mean, to me, that's the area that has a lot of potential now, because we are in a remote scenario. We do need to be able to connect. So the IoT sensors and IoT devices come quickly into play. Generally, I mean, I'm not showing here, generally the cost of many of the devices, IoT devices, are not very high. So the barrier is relatively lower. But the understanding in the healthcare industry to be able to translate that to meaningful decisions for the doctors is I think where the challenge lies. But many use cases, and what I will do is to kind of maybe share that with Suma after this. Maybe you could take a look. There are multiple use cases in that, but this is just a simple example.
Thanks, Karthik. I guess we have time for one more question. Is that okay
Sure.
with you, Karthik?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, any number is fine.
All right. So Mushtaq Ali asked, and now project management, learning and development, and business management are getting mixed up. Do you think project management itself will get mixed up and evolve into another field like marketing, technology? Okay, this is a little bit of mixed up question. So
But yeah, okay.
I would recommend to read it.
Yeah, I'll try to understand it. So no worries. I think what you're saying, Mushtaq, is that there are various aspects that are coming in. So maybe some business aspects are coming in, some technology aspects are coming. I see. I don't see that it will get it is. I mean, the way I view it, it doesn't get replaced. What you do will vary. Now, what it means is that, and your question is quite interesting, because what you're trying to say is, if I have then the time to do some other things, can I do do marketing? Can I do can I get into other business development areas maybe? So I think that will evolve. It's difficult to say which area we will go to. For example, if you're in a company that's doing that's more marketing focused, maybe it's has an e-commerce platform, maybe the tendency for you to get into some of those areas, maybe your ability to bring revenue through your project or optimizing revenue through the project could be something you focus on. Largely in a longish period, if these real technologies all I would say, especially IoT, if they come across that turf and actually establish themselves, then I would say some of what could happen. We will change the way we are doing project management. So our focus will not just be on the delivery, it will be more on the decision making. It will be bringing, these different kinds of resources together. It will be to manage a different generation, and also where the emotional intelligence also comes into play. So yes, our roles will evolve, it will change, uh, but I think whether it's marketing, business development, or finance, those are very contextual aspects in an organization, and I think therefore generalizing that is a little difficult.
Sure. Thank you so much, Karthik, for answering our participants' questions. We just are right on time. And participants, please go ahead and ask your questions as well as share them with us at our email ID office@pmi-pcc.org so that we can share them with Karthik and get the answers for you. Meanwhile, just another announcement. We have the PMI PCC General Body Meeting, annual General Body Meeting coming up on 31st of October at 4:30 p.m. I, on behalf of entire board, request you all to be there to know all about what the chapter has done during the last 1 year. So you must have got an email with a link to it a couple of days ago. Please register and be there for the AGM. Okay. With that, it comes to the end of the session. Thank you so much, dear participants, and wonderful thanks to Karthik for sharing your thoughts on this. Venkat, would you like to close the session?
Sure, Suma. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank Karthik for accepting to be the speaker. I think the kind of subject he covered today is phenomenal, right from PPM strategy to tools, and he talked about multiple technologies and also some of the survey results. And unfortunately, he was not able to play the video, so definitely we'll ask him to share the links with all the participants. So, but otherwise, thanks a lot, Karthik. I think it's very interesting and in-depth session. We look forward for more sessions like this in future as well. Thanks a lot from all the members.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks so much, Suma. Thanks so much, Venkat. And I think on hindsight, it's good that we didn't play the video because I would have run out of time. So I think it worked in our favor. Of course, I'll share all the links. They'll be part of the presentation also. And feel free to connect with me on email, on LinkedIn. I will share both through Suma, both those connects. So I know some of you had asked me questions. Please feel free to connect on LinkedIn, and I will definitely answer all of them if I know the answer, and if I don't, then you'll have to wait, or you'll have to tell me what the answer is. But largely, I should be able to give you some of them, kids. And thanks so much,
Sure.
for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Karthik. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in the session. The recording of the session will be available soon on YouTube, and we will announce it as well in our Telegram channel. And we will look forward to you viewing it as well as sharing your thoughts on it as well. So, with the invitation to the AGM on 31st, we end the session. Thank you so much and have a great evening. Bye bye.